before you move on, stay with me for just a moment. There is something strangely familiar about the quiet before a new day begins. And maybe you have felt it without ever finding the words for it. Perhaps you have opened your eyes some mornings with the faint sense that today could be different, only to watch that feeling disappear before your feet ever touched the floor. Chosen one, that quiet moment has never been as ordinary as it seemed. Tomorrow morning will begin like countless mornings before it. A little light will slip through the window, the room will still be silent, and almost without thinking your hand may reach toward the same familiar screen. Yet hidden inside those first few moments is something so small it is easy to overlook, and so significant it quietly shapes everything that follows. Tonight is simply giving you the chance to recognize it before the noise has the opportunity to cover it again. If this feels familiar, it is because your heart has recognized this invitation before. There were mornings when something inside you whispered to pause, to breathe, to be still for just a little longer, but life always seemed to arrive first. You told yourself there would be another chance later. And by the time the coffee was poured or the first message appeared, the quiet certainty you woke up with had already faded into the background. That did not happen because you lacked desire. It happened because no one ever showed you how precious those first moments really are. Heaven is not asking you to carry the weight of an entire day before sunrise. It is asking for something much smaller and much more intimate. There is a brief window between sleep and distraction where your heart is still open, before yesterday's disappointments, today's responsibilities, and every anxious thought begin speaking at once. In that gentle space, your spirit often recognizes what the rest of the day struggles to hear. You already know this window exists. You have felt flashes of clarity that seemed almost impossible to explain. You have remembered something important, sensed a quiet direction, or felt an unexpected peace, only to lose it beneath endless little demands that insisted they mattered more. Those moments were never imaginary. They were invitations that arrived while your soul was still quiet enough to notice them. That is why this message has reached you tonight instead of tomorrow morning. By the time tomorrow begins, the world will already be asking for your attention. Tonight gives you something different. It allows you to remember before you fall asleep that the first thing waiting for you when you wake is not another obligation. It is an opportunity. As you listen, notice what is happening inside you. Some of you feel a calm but unmistakable pull, almost as though part of you has been waiting to hear these words. Others already feel resistance beginning to speak, offering reasons why tomorrow should look exactly like yesterday. Both responses matter because they reveal the same truth. Something meaningful is standing at the edge of this ordinary morning. Hold on to that feeling instead of arguing with it. You do not have to force certainty tonight. Simply recognize that something within you has awakened, and sometimes that quiet recognition is the beginning of everything. If you want to anchor this moment before you sleep, type, "I will not sleep through it," in the comments. Let those words become a promise to your own heart, a quiet reminder waiting for you when tomorrow arrives. There is something else you deserve to understand about your mornings. Every new day begins long before you realize you have made a choice. During those first unguarded minutes, either your own spirit gently sets the direction for the day, or the world does it for you. Think about how often the first light you see is not the sunrise, but the glow of a phone screen in a quiet room. Before your own thoughts have settled, other voices, other expectations, and other people's urgency have already stepped into the space that belonged to you. By the time you finally look up, your attention has been carried somewhere else, and the day begins feeling as though it belongs to everyone except you, and everyone except you. Chosen one, I want to give this pattern a name, because once something has a name, it becomes easier to recognize. What has followed you through so many mornings is not simply poor discipline or lack of commitment. It is a quiet kind of theft that happens when your heart is at its most open and your defenses have not yet awakened. It never needs your entire day. It only asks for the first 10 minutes, because the tone of those 10 minutes has a way of echoing through everything that comes after. Now you can begin to see why every attempt to rebuild your life halfway through the day has felt so exhausting. Chosen one. By noon, the quiet battle has already been decided, and you've been spending the rest of the day trying to recover something that slipped away before you were fully awake. That realization isn't meant to discourage you. It's meant to set you free, because the story you've been telling yourself was never the whole story. You were never as broken as you believed. You weren't someone who lacked discipline or determination. You were trying to reclaim a day that had quietly drifted away before your heart had a chance to choose its direction. Sit with that for a moment, because sometimes relief begins the moment we stop accusing ourselves. How many afternoons have ended with the same quiet disappointment? You started the morning believing this time would be different, yet somewhere between waking up and the demands of the day, that promise slowly disappeared. You blamed your character, your habits, even your faith, when in reality your effort was beginning long after the most important moment had already passed. The beautiful part is that the answer isn't another complicated routine or greater willpower stretched across an already tired day. It is astonishingly small. Protect one sacred window, and the rest of the day begins to follow the peace you establish there, instead of the pressure waiting outside it. Sometimes a life changes because one small beginning is finally guarded. People have understood this truth for generations, even if they described it in different ways. Think about the story of the manna in the wilderness. Every morning it arrived fresh, and those who gathered it early received what had been prepared for them. Those who waited until later found empty ground, not because the gift wasn't real, but because it belonged to a particular moment. That story has always carried something deeper than bread. It reminds us that clarity, strength, and quiet direction often arrive with the morning, before the noise of the world grows loud. Some things cannot be collected on our own timetable because they were meant to meet us in stillness. Tomorrow, your invitation is simply to become someone who gathers at dawn instead of rushing past the gift waiting there. If something inside you recognizes that truth, honor it. Maybe you've spent years trying to gather your peace after the day had already scattered it. Maybe you've searched for clarity in the afternoon when it had first whispered to you at sunrise. If you're ready to begin differently, type "I gather at dawn" in the comments. Not for me, but as a quiet promise to yourself that tomorrow will begin with intention instead of reaction. There is one more thing you need to know before morning comes. The moment you decide to protect those first few minutes, you will almost certainly feel resistance. It won't appear later in the day when you're busy. It will meet you in the silence between sleep and waking, because that is where the choice is made. You already know what that voice sounds like. It tells you 5 more minutes won't matter. It whispers that today isn't the right day, that you're too tired, that next week will be easier. It sounds reasonable because it has rehearsed the same conversation with you many times before, and perhaps you've believed it more often than you'd like to admit. The important thing is not that the resistance appears, it's what its timing reveals. Resistance has a way of standing near the doors that matter most when something inside you begins moving toward healing, peace, or obedience. There is often a part of you that reaches for what feels familiar instead. So when that heaviness greets you tomorrow, don't mistake it for truth. Let it remind you that you're standing at a threshold worth protecting. Maybe you've also noticed something that happens later in the day. There are afternoons when nothing terrible has happened, yet a quiet sadness settles over you anyway. You can't quite explain it. It feels less like failure and more like the strange grief of knowing the day slipped through your hands before you ever truly lived it. That ache has been trying to tell you something all along. It was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was the part of your heart that still remembered who you wanted to become. People who have completely stopped hoping rarely feel that kind of sorrow anymore. The fact that you still feel it means something inside you is still awake, still reaching, still believing your mornings can become something different. So the next time that familiar heaviness visits you in the afternoon, don't rush to silence it. Listen to what it's pointing toward. It isn't asking you to stay in regret. It's quietly leading you back to the place where tomorrow begins. And now, let me tell you the task as simply as I can. Before your hand reaches for your phone, before messages, headlines, or anyone else's voice enters your mind, sit in stillness for a few moments. Breathe. Become present. Let your spirit settle before the world begins pulling at your attention. That's all. The simplicity of it is exactly why it's so easy to overlook, and exactly why it carries so much power. The smallest acts often shape the deepest parts of a life, because they happen before anyone else is watching. In those quiet minutes, something gentle begins to return. The part of you that dreams and the part of you that lives those dreams stop pulling in opposite directions. Your heart and your mind begin remembering each other again. You aren't escaping your life. You're allowing your inner world to come into harmony before the demands of the day ask anything from you. Think of a musician who pauses to tune an instrument before stepping onto the stage. The audience never applauds that moment, yet everything that follows depends on it. Your morning is much the same. When you rush past it, the entire day feels slightly out of tune. When you protect it, ordinary moments begin carrying a different kind of peace. That is the quiet difference between surviving another day and walking through one with steady purpose, and it begins, as it always has, inside that small sacred window, waiting for you at dawn. Let yourself imagine where this begins to lead, chosen one. Don't picture years from now. Picture one ordinary morning a week from today. You wake before the world asks anything of you, and instead of reaching for the noise, you protect those few quiet minutes. At first, nothing dramatic happens, yet something feels different. The heaviness that used to greet you every morning no longer feels quite as convincing, and the thoughts that once pulled you in every direction begin to settle into something clearer. As the day unfolds, you notice little things you would have overlooked before. A decision that usually drains you comes with surprising ease. An interruption doesn't steal your peace the way it used to. Then sometime that afternoon, almost by accident, you realize something that catches you off guard. You made it through half the day without carrying that familiar feeling of being scattered inside. Now let your heart move a little farther ahead. Imagine a month of protecting that same quiet window. Those mornings have begun to gather, one after another, until they become part of the rhythm of your life. You aren't reacting to everything anymore. You move from a place that feels grounded, steady, and deeply familiar, almost as though you've returned to someone you thought you'd lost. The people around you may notice it before you do. They won't necessarily know what has changed, but they'll feel it in the way you respond, the way you listen, the way you carry yourself. The truth is, you haven't become a different person. You've uncovered the person who was always there beneath the hurry, beneath the shame, beneath all the mornings that seemed to disappear before they ever truly began. That is what one protected dawn quietly builds, not all at once, but one morning at a time. I also want to be honest with you, because encouragement alone has never changed anyone's life. You've probably heard advice like this before. Guard your mornings. Sit in stillness. Begin the day with God. Maybe you even tried for a few days before old patterns slowly returned, leaving you wondering if you were simply the kind of person who couldn't stay consistent. So don't answer tonight with the same conclusion you've repeated for years. Don't tell yourself that you just don't have enough discipline, because that explanation has never brought you peace. There is something much gentler and much truer beneath the surface. The struggle has never been about how deeply you wanted to change. It has been about what happens in those fragile moments before your mind is fully awake, when habits move faster than intention, and yesterday quietly reaches for you before hope has the chance to speak. You've been trying to fight that battle with determination alone, and anyone would grow weary fighting a battle that begins before they even realize it has started. Think about your own mornings for a moment. You already know, almost within the first hour after waking, what kind of day you're likely to have. There are mornings when a quiet heaviness settles over you before you've even left your room, and somehow that feeling follows every conversation, every decision, every ordinary moment. Then there are those rare mornings that seem strangely clear, when everything flows with an ease you can't quite explain. Those mornings were never random. They revealed something you've been living with all along. On some days, the world reached you first. On others, whether by grace or simple stillness, your spirit had a chance to breathe before the noise arrived. The difference wasn't luck. It was the window. Feel the hope hidden inside that realization. It means your best days were never accidents. They were glimpses of what becomes possible whenever that sacred beginning is protected. You are not simply reacting to moods or circumstances. Chosen one, you are the keeper of a window, and the one who guards the beginning quietly shapes everything that follows. Lives rarely change because of one extraordinary decision. More often they are shaped by thousands of ordinary mornings that no one else ever sees. Each dawn becomes another quiet vote for the person you are becoming. Day after day, those unseen moments begin changing the direction of your life long before anyone notices the results. If something inside you is responding to that, don't let it remain only a feeling. Type "the window is mine" in the comments as a declaration that tomorrow's beginning will no longer be decided by habit or distraction, but by intention. I've watched this happen more times than I can count. People who believed they simply weren't morning people. People who had abandoned one routine after another discovered that everything changed when they stopped trying to conquer the entire day and simply learned to honor one quiet beginning. Again and again they reached the same realization. The greatest victory wasn't becoming more productive. It was finally finding one place in life where they stopped abandoning themselves. Something beautiful happens when you keep that promise often enough. You begin trusting your own heart again. You stop seeing yourself as the person who always means well but never follows through. Instead, you become someone who quietly rises before anyone is watching, choosing faithfulness over comfort, one morning at a time. That is what this practice is really rebuilding. It's deeper than a schedule. It's restoring your confidence in your own word. Little by little, your yes begins to carry weight because you've lived it enough times to believe it yourself. Imagine the quiet strength that grows from that. A person who keeps faith with themselves in the smallest hidden moments walks through the rest of life differently. There is a calm authority that cannot be borrowed or performed because it was built before sunrise, in silence, when no applause was waiting. The window does far more than reshape your mornings. It restores the person beneath them. If you've been longing to meet that version of yourself, don't look at tomorrow as the whole journey. See it as the first stone laid with steady hands before the world awakens. Every lasting foundation begins exactly that way, one faithful morning, one protected window, one quiet yes at a time. Lay that first stone tomorrow, chosen one. Then lay another the morning after, and another after that. You don't have to become the person you've dreamed of overnight. You only have to stop surrendering the one quiet place where that person has been waiting to emerge all along. I know what may be crossing your mind right now, because most people carry the same memory. You're thinking about every morning you promised yourself would be different, the alarms you set with confidence, the routines you planned on Sunday evening, the fresh starts that somehow disappeared before the week had barely begun. Maybe a quiet voice is already whispering, "Why should this time be any different?" If that's the question in your heart, don't rush past it. Listen carefully, because the answer has the power to loosen years of disappointment. Those attempts did not fail because you were weak. They failed because you were trying to build something beautiful on a beginning that had already been claimed by distraction. You kept adding more habits, more rules, more expectations, while the first moments of your morning remained unprotected. Even the strongest house struggles to stand when its foundation is never given the chance to settle. This invitation is different. I'm not asking you to carry a long list of morning rituals or transform your life before breakfast. and asking you to protect one small window, just a few quiet moments where your spirit can wake before the noise does. There is wisdom in starting small. The smallest promises are often the ones we keep, and every promise you keep begins changing the way you see yourself. What once felt insignificant slowly becomes sacred because it reminds you that faithfulness grows one decision at a time. So don't carry your history into tomorrow as evidence that you'll fail again. Carry it as proof that you've been searching for the right beginning. Every experience that left you discouraged also taught you what doesn't restore the heart. Now you're being invited to begin where lasting change has always wanted to begin. When that familiar voice tells you that you always quit, answer it with compassion instead of shame. The person you were yesterday doesn't have to argue with that voice. The person you become tomorrow simply takes one quiet step that yesterday never took. Let me leave you with the truth in its simplest form. Your days are shaped by the spirit you carry into their first moments. Protect those first moments, and the rest of the day begins to follow a different rhythm. And above all, remember this, chosen one, you are not someone who was destined to keep failing. You are the rightful keeper of a sacred window that has been waiting patiently for you to return. Once you see that, so many things begin to make sense. The mornings that slipped away, the afternoons that felt strangely empty, the good days that arrived without explanation, they all point back to the same quiet beginning that has been asking for your attention. Now only one question remains. You know the window is real. You know what you're being invited to protect. You also know that understanding something and living it are rarely the same thing. That is why tonight isn't only about gaining clarity. It is about making a decision while your heart is still listening. Before sleep comes, let yourself quietly choose the kind of morning you want to wake into. Picture yourself opening your eyes, taking one slow breath, and choosing presence before pressure, stillness before noise, and intention before habit. Tomorrow will not ask you to be perfect. It will simply ask whether you remember the promise you made in this quiet moment. And if you return to that window, even imperfectly, you may discover that the life you've been trying so hard to change has always begun in the smallest act of faithfulness. There are people who spent years searching for peace in every place they were told to look. Chosen one, they prayed faithfully, filled journals with honest words, followed every practice they believed might finally quiet the noise inside them. Yet they still woke each morning carrying the same heaviness. The turning point didn't come because they suddenly became stronger. It came because they finally learned to guard the first moments of the day instead of surrendering them. Again and again the story sounded remarkably similar. Someone who had grown used to waking with tension already sitting in their chest began protecting that quiet beginning, and little by little the fog started to lift. They couldn't always explain what had changed. They simply knew that the mornings which once felt like something to survive slowly became a place where they could breathe again. Perhaps you've experienced both kinds of mornings yourself. There are days when you wake already bracing for what is coming, as though your heart has started running before your feet have even touched the floor. And then there are those rare mornings when everything feels strangely lighter, when your thoughts settle naturally, and the day unfolds with a quiet grace that seems almost impossible to explain. Those moments were never accidents. They were reminders of who you are when your spirit is given room to awaken before the world begins speaking. You have tasted that peace before, even if only for a few minutes. And that is why something inside you recognizes these words now. Whether you have protected that window before, or whether tomorrow will be your first intentional beginning, the invitation remains the same. The dawn is waiting for you with the same quiet patience it always has. It has never demanded perfection. It has only asked for your presence. So before you sleep tonight, I want you to rehearse tomorrow with me. A beginning imagined with intention is far more difficult to forget when morning arrives. Let your shoulders soften. Feel the weight of the day slowly leave your body. Lower the phone in your hand for a moment and take one slow breath that reaches deeper than the last. There is nothing to force here, nothing to prove. This is simply the posture of someone making room for God before making room for the world. Now picture tomorrow morning. The room is still dim. The air is quiet. Before your hand reaches for the screen, before anyone else's thoughts become louder than your own, see yourself pause. Just for a moment, take one slow breath in the silence and gently say within yourself, "This window is mine, and I gather at dawn." Let those words settle instead of rushing past them. Feel them becoming something more than a sentence. Let them become a decision. As you remain there, imagine the parts of yourself that so often feel divided beginning to move toward one another. The part that hopes and the part that acts, the part that prays and the part that lives. Picture them meeting in quiet agreement, not through effort, but through stillness. You don't have to force peace to appear, you don't have to manufacture clarity. You simply remain present long enough for your heart to remember the rhythm it was created for, before the world asks it to perform. Wake. Pause. Breathe. Turn inward before you turn outward. Gather before the noise grows louder. That is the beginning. It has always been smaller than you imagined, and perhaps that is why it has always carried so much power. As you picture it now, notice what changes inside you. Maybe the tension behind your eyes softens. Maybe your breathing becomes slower. Maybe there is a warmth in your chest that wasn't there a few moments ago. Hold on to that feeling, chosen one, because this quiet peace is not something distant that you have to chase someday. It is the doorway waiting for you when tomorrow begins. Each morning you return to that quiet beginning, chosen one, something remarkable begins to happen. The stillness no longer feels like a place you occasionally visit. Little by little, it becomes the place you live from. What once required effort slowly becomes familiar, until peace feels less like a rare experience and more like the ground beneath your feet. If something inside you has been responding to these words, don't let this remain only an emotion that disappears by morning. Give it a voice. Type, "The first 10 minutes are his," in the comments. Not as a slogan, but as a promise your future self will remember. Tonight you aren't asking for permission to begin again. You're quietly declaring that tomorrow will no longer begin the way yesterday did. There is power in speaking a commitment before the moment it will be tested. When you put your intention into words, you give your heart something to return to when resistance appears at dawn. Tomorrow morning, when the familiar heaviness whispers that nothing has changed, your own promise will already be waiting there, reminding you of who you chose to become before you fell asleep. So don't allow this moment to fade into another memory that felt meaningful for a few minutes and was forgotten by sunrise. Plant it deeply. Let it become a quiet marker in your life, something the old pattern has to pass before it can reach you again. Before we come to the close of this message, there is something you need to understand about yourself. Tomorrow, there may be a voice that tells you this doesn't really matter, that you aren't important enough for these small choices to make any difference. Don't believe it. A meaningful task is never entrusted without purpose. The fact that this message found you before tomorrow arrived carries its own quiet invitation. You are not simply watching your life happen from the sidelines. Even the smallest act of faithfulness matters, because small moments often become the places where larger stories quietly begin. There is another truth I hope you'll carry into the morning. The days you thought you wasted were never empty in the way you imagined. Every morning you surrendered taught you what it feels like to lose something valuable. Every disappointment deepened your understanding of why this quiet window matters. Think about that for a moment. Someone who has never experienced the cost of giving away their mornings rarely understands why they should protect them. You do. You know that feeling in your own heart. The regret you carried wasn't punishment, it was preparation. So don't see yourself as someone arriving at tomorrow from weakness. See yourself as someone arriving with understanding that had to be earned. You are not gathering at dawn as a beginner. You are gathering with the wisdom of someone who finally knows why those first moments are worth protecting. Before we finish, I want to ask something that reaches beyond you. Somewhere tonight there is another person who will wake tomorrow already exhausted before the day even begins. They will reach for a screen before they reach for themselves, and they'll quietly believe the story that says they simply aren't capable of changing. Perhaps as you've listened, someone's face has come to mind. If it has, don't ignore that gentle nudge. Share this message with them tonight, before another morning slips away. Offer it as hope, not obligation, as one person quietly reminding another that a different beginning is still possible. That is one of the quiet ways the Chosen One walks through the world, not by drawing attention to themselves, but by passing light to someone standing in the same darkness they once knew. Sometimes the greatest gift you can offer another person is simply arriving with a reminder at the right moment. And if these words have truly settled somewhere deep inside you, gently press the like button, so this message has the chance to reach someone else before their own morning arrives. One simple act may place this encouragement in front of a heart that was about to surrender another day, without realizing a different beginning was possible. Now let everything else grow quiet. Let your shoulders soften once more. Let the room become still around you. There is nothing you need to accomplish in this moment, except to be present. Tomorrow has not arrived yet, but you can already feel it waiting beyond tonight, carrying a beginning unlike the ones you've known before. I'm grateful that out of all the moments this message could have reached you, it came before the morning instead of after it. I'm grateful for every dawn you thought you lost, because each one quietly taught you the value of the one that's waiting for you now. And I'm grateful that something inside you chose to stay and listen, because perhaps it recognized an invitation your soul had been hoping to hear for a very long time. So before you close your eyes tonight, release what you've been carrying. Let the guilt of yesterday fall away. Let go of the belief that you lack discipline. Let go of the fear that tomorrow will simply repeat every morning that came before it. Leave all of it here in the quiet, so you can rise with open hands, ready to receive what each new dawn has been offering you all along. If you're honest with yourself in this quiet moment, Chosen One, I think you already know something, not in a vague or distant way, but deep inside where truth settles before words ever reach it. You already know whether tomorrow is the morning you've been waiting to reclaim. Something inside you recognized that possibility long before this message reached its end. And perhaps that's why you stayed. Before you close your eyes tonight, carry 3 simple things with you into the morning. They are small enough to remember and powerful enough to change the direction of an ordinary day. First, when you wake, let your hand remain still for just a moment. Don't let the screen become the first voice that greets you. Give yourself the gift of one quiet breath before the world begins asking for your attention. Second, remember the words you've been holding in your heart tonight. This window is mine, and I gather at dawn. Whisper them before yesterday's worries arrive. Let those words become the first conversation your soul has with the morning. Third, protect those first few quiet minutes. Sit with God. Breathe. Listen. Turn inward before you turn outward. The task has never been complicated. Its power has always been hidden inside its simplicity. Tomorrow may feel harder than you expect. Don't let that surprise you. Old patterns rarely leave without one last attempt to convince you they belong. If the familiar heaviness appears when the alarm sounds, don't mistake it for failure. Sometimes resistance grows louder precisely because it senses it is losing its hold. The second morning will feel different. Then another will come. Little by little, something begins to shift that no one else can see at first. The habit of surrender slowly becomes the habit of returning, until gathering at dawn is no longer something you try to do. It simply becomes part of who you are. Real change rarely arrives in one dramatic moment. More often, it is built through quiet faithfulness, repeated when no one is watching. One morning becomes another, and another becomes a new way of living. Looking back, you'll realize the life you longed for wasn't created all at once. It was shaped in the hidden places before sunrise. So stand for a moment in the person you're becoming and say these words with me, not as wishful thinking, but as a quiet declaration of who you choose to be when morning comes. I am not the one who sleeps through what matters. I am the keeper of my mornings. I gather at dawn before the noise has a chance to speak. My first moments belong to God, and from those moments the rest of my day receives its direction. I am awake. I am chosen. Tomorrow I rise and I gather. Let those words settle deeper than your thoughts. Let them reach the place where tomorrow's first decision will actually be made. When the alarm sounds, remember that you are not the version of yourself who has spent years believing every excuse. You are the chosen one who has learned the value of protecting what is sacred before the world reaches for it. If you want to seal this commitment before you rest, type "I rise and I gather" in the comments, not to impress anyone, but as one final promise between the person you are tonight and the person who will open their eyes tomorrow morning. And if you want to keep walking this path alongside others who are learning to guard the beginning of their days, stay close. There is strength in remembering that you are not walking this road by yourself. Every dawn becomes a little easier when hearts are learning the same quiet faithfulness together. Tonight you arrived carrying years of scattered mornings, silent disappointment, and questions you couldn't answer. You leave with something much simpler, yet far more valuable. A quiet understanding that your life has never asked you to master everything at once. It has simply been waiting for you to protect the first moments that shape everything else. Carry that understanding gently into your sleep. Tomorrow is not another morning to endure. It is the first morning you consciously reclaim. The window is waiting. The dawn will arrive as it always has. Fresh grace will meet you there, and this time you will be present enough to receive it. So rest now. Release yesterday completely. Wake with open hands, an unhurried breath, and a willing heart. And when the first light enters the room, remember that the first 10 minutes are never just 10 minutes. They become the quiet beginning from which an entire life is shaped. It is settled, and so it is.